Madam Deputy Speaker, the working world has changed fundamentally over the last 2 decades, and in particular the practice of working not just on a typical 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, but in a more flexible way. What was once an exception is now very much a norm. Whether it's flex time, part-time, compressed hours, annualised hours, working remotely, job sharing, sabbaticals, they're all far more common now for employers to offer and for employees to accept. And that only increased further during the COVID-19 pandemic. We know that because we saw lots of businesses rethinking how they do things and what they need from their staff, including many in Burnley and Padiham. That saw organisations for the first time adopt flexible working practices and do so in a rapid way. That wasn't just working remotely for some of my employers in my constituency. It also saw them take a more flexible approach to childcare and the kind of hours employees were able to work. Now, some have sought to scale that back, but a great deal more, I would suggest, have continued with arrangements, even if it's with tweaks, as they've seen ways that their business can adapt. But we must recognise, as my honourable friend said, that flexible working isn't for every company or every employee or every set of circumstances. So what we want to do, I think, is encourage employees to give it thought, to give greater thought to how you can get a productive workforce, whether flexible working is one way of doing so. But I think about the host of brilliant manufacturing businesses that I've got in Burnley and Padiham. For them, flexible working may, and I emphasise may, be more difficult to operate in practice. Shift patterns, sometimes keeping a factory open 24/7, and we saw the importance of that during COVID, where they switched manufacturing from often their traditional product to PPE and hand sanitizer. That for them, flexible working and telling your employees you can work from home or work annualised hours, if that doesn't fit in a shift pattern, then we've got to be mindful and respectful of that in this place. And so I do wonder whether there should be an option in law, not just to say yes or no to a request for flexible working, but to give a trial period where you don't have to have the statutory consideration period of 3 months or 2 months if this bill is passed, where you can say it's not a yes and it's not a no. We want to see whether it works, because I think that would alleviate some of the concerns that small businesses or businesses that have never found a way to offer flexible working. I wonder whether that would be a way.
Will you give way on that point?
Yeah, of course.
It's a fantastic and interesting idea to consider how to allow a bit of flexibility both ways. Who would he see would be the right arbiter of such a scheme?
I think ultimately that's got to be a conversation between the business, the employer and the employee. I think most employers want to do the right thing for the people who work for them. That's how you have a productive and motivated workforce. And the employee, I think, often wants to do the right thing for the employer. And so getting both sides together to say, is there a way of coming up with a trial period where it might not be exactly what the employee has asked for, it might not be exactly what the employer has offered for so long, but is there a trial period? And knowing, I think, as an employer, that at the end of that, there's not an obligation to say, yes, okay, this definitely works, or no, it definitely doesn't. But knowing you've got the option of considering it, I think that would help. And if it doesn't work out as planned, and the employer doesn't think it's sustainable in the long term, something that's sustainable in 4 or 5 weeks might not be sustainable for 4 or 5 years, then it gives, I think, an employer confidence to say, not now, but I'm happy to look at it again. It gives someone a little bit more flexibility as an employer. I also think, Madam Deputy Speaker, that as I think about my constituency, an area with higher unemployment than some of the parts of the country, that flexible working does offer an opportunity to bring people back into the workforce who might otherwise struggle, be it because of childcare issues or because they're not ready to take on full-time hours. But we've got to make sure in doing that we address some of the points that my honourable friend made about building a culture. And actually, if you're going to bring someone back into the workforce for the very first time, they might want a greater propensity for working from home or doing annualised hours. But if the impact of that is you don't properly give them the opportunity to embed themselves in the organisation and get the benefits of learning from colleagues, then actually the downsides outweigh the positives. Of course I will.
He's making an excellent speech, but I just wanted him to touch on the point of productivity. That is the central point. It is great to have people, to offer people the chance to work in various different ways and various means, but if that employee is not productive when in that different situation away from the office, it simply cannot happen.
I agree entirely with what my honourable friend has said. One of the great problems that has vexed our economy for at least a decade is lost productivity, or the suppression of productivity growth that we've seen. And so any changes we try to make to employment law and employment regulations has to have at the centre of it, what will this do for productivity? Because ultimately, the focus that we've been speaking about for a long time about economic growth, none of that happens without turning your workforce, particularly in an economy like ours, where unemployment at a national level is at 3.5%. And when you've got unemployment at that lower level, then the only way you can grow your economy on a sustainable, high growth basis is by increasing employee productivity. And so we've got to think very carefully about how we do this. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, I think this bill does offer a way forward. I think it does offer employers and employees a balance of flexibilities. But I would just encourage, as we think through the bill as it goes, hopefully as it goes to committee stage, whether there are further tweaks we could make to flexible working and the kind of options available to employers about how they say yes or no, or whether there is a possible third option. But otherwise, I look forward to supporting the bill later.
Yeah.